Hello and welcome. For those unaware, Tales from the Peakplex number 8, B72, was recently found by someone, so the stories are now unofficially out and we know what happens in them. One of those stories is named Dittophobia, and it reveals a sane amount about the FNAF lore, basically solving Sister Location and FNAF 4 after years, as well as Midnight Motorist. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about a theory connected to that. If you don't know what happens in Dittophobia already, I'll try my best to explain it, but you might be a little confused if you're not already well aware of what happens. This video is also going under the assumption of Tales games, which is the theory that Tales from the Pizzaplex is connected to the game's timeline, which I've explained in this video if you want to check it out. Basically, in this story, it is revealed that the experiment room victims from Sister Location are kids that William Afton kidnapped and kept in the facility for years. This facility being Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals. And guess what? That's all you need to know for this theory. Yep, that's everything. Everything else in the story is optional for this theory, for you to have the knowledge of, so I'm not going to mention it in order to save time. So let's hop into this. Let's start off at the beginning of the timeline. Bite victim dies. Very sad. Which one dies first, Bite victim or Charlotte? Well, it doesn't really matter for this theory. All that matters is both of them are dead. Charlotte's death leads to her possessing the puppet, and the Bite victims leads to the topic of this theory. I believe that his death creates something, and that something has to do with his plushie. A lot of people assume that William is the one speaking through the Fredbear plush because of the Easter egg that's found in Sister Location, but after this story, I don't think that's the case. William Afton creates Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals after the death of Elizabeth Afton, and Elizabeth Afton dies after the Bite victim, as there isn't really motivation for William to create killer animatronics so early in the timeline, meaning that Fredbear plush with that walkie-talkie was put there after the death of the crying child. The fact that it can't be William, along with the fact that the logbook describes him as an imaginary friend, most likely means that the Fredbear plush is what the base interpretation was originally from FNAF 4, that he is just an imaginary friend that speaks to the Bite victim, acting as a stand-in for a subconscious. The plush is real, but he's not actually teleporting around and talking to a little kid. It's all in his mind. What then happens is very similar to what happens in B72. The Bite victim's imaginary friend, with the induction of extreme amounts of agony from the bite, turns him into an agony creature, that agony creature being Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy would be created at the bite, explaining all his connections to FNAF 4 as well as the crying child. For why this is important is it affects William's motivations moving forward. William in some way knows of the creation of Shadow Freddy as he knows him from Follow Me. This makes sense since William's heavily connected to the spirit world, being an alchemist and having intense knowledge on these creatures in the Fazbear Frights and original novels lore. It also makes sense with Dittophobia being a William science story after all of him experimenting. So Shadow Freddy and the puppet's possession are most likely the things that get William interested in the science of remnant, or souls. William's first experiment and plan is to create Circus Baby in order to capture a child and experiment on them. This goes horribly wrong and it kills his child. This makes Elizabeth possess the animatronic, which does one thing he wanted, but it doesn't create an agony creature because no one witnessed Elizabeth's death, unlike the Bite victim, so it didn't leave a lasting effect like the shadows need to, as implied by the Fazbear Frights series, so it doesn't create an agony being like William was expecting. William learns from his mistakes and creates the FNAF 4 experiment rooms. Observation 1 is to watch kids who go to the pizzeria, most likely looking for ones who are alone without families, following them home, kidnapping them, and bringing them to Observation 2. The reason that this has to happen here in the timeline is due to the fact that the observation rooms have to be made after the death of Elizabeth, so the observation rooms have to be made in reaction to her death and William's plan at Circus Baby's Pizza World failing. William learned from his first mistake that he needs to have prolonged agony. The way he chooses to do this by having multiple victims and making the experiment rooms automatic, so they continue to run even when he isn't there, allowing for them to create prolonged agony to potentially create an agony being. In order to better replicate what happened in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, which is what he's trying to do, he uses things from his house as well as using the Fredbear plush as a walkie-talkie and setting up a similar contract to what happened to Bite victim in the minigames in order to try to recreate the spark that made Shadow Freddy in the first place. But this is a failure, but for a different reason. Unbeknownst to William, the fact that he recreated FNAF 4 only made it so this experiment would feed Shadow Freddy, giving him more agony and giving him the memory of the experiment rooms. This will be important for later, instead of creating a new event which he would need to make a different agony being. Then learning from this this mistake, William would then do the MCI, which would finally do what he wants, creating an agony being and allowing the kids to be possessed by the animatronics. As we know from the novels, this is William's crowning achievement, as he describes it in vivid detail and has a very strong connection with this particular murder. And the missing children's incident also just so happens to be the same incident that created Eleanor in the Fazbear Fright series, the most powerful agony being in the entire franchise, who haunts everything in Freddy's in the Fazbear Fright series, and has a strong connection to William, lining up with the MCI. The MCI is the most damning event in Fazbear history, and has a strong connection to William as we see in the original novels, so it creating Eleanor makes the most sense. We then skip forward to 1987, where William commits the Save Them murders and gets stopped by the puppet. Him getting stopped by the puppet means he can't stuff the kids, and this creates Shadow Bonnie, but instead of being on William's side, it's on the kids' side. The reason for this is that Shadow Bonnie is an agony creature that was formed at an event that William failed to kill, making him more represent William's failure to commit to his goal that he had and save them, making him side with the kids later in the franchise, mainly in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. William's motivations would continue there, as we already know from what Henry says in Five Nights at Freddy's 6 and what he says in the novels and other appearances he has. To me, this theory is incredibly likely, not only because it shows William's motivations throughout time, but it already lines up with what we know about William from both games and books. It leaves William with a consistent motive throughout the entire series, how that motive formed and how it changed through time. It also fully explains the shadows, where they came from and why they exist, and why William has such a strong connection to all three of them. And hey, remember when I said Shadow Freddy consumed the agony from the experiment rooms? Well, that would then explain why in Five Nights at Freddy 4, he reappears to give Michael the nightmares from the agony that he fed off during those experiments. William didn't recreate a new agony creature, he just added to an old one. With that, I hope you enjoyed. This is my small mini theory about Dittophobia before it releases technically, and I'll see you on the flip side. Later!